One of the hardest truths about narcissistic behavior is that many narcissists do not recognize your true worth until you are completely out of their reach. While they still have access to you, they often assume you will always be there, no matter how poorly they treat you. But once that connection is completely cut off, something begins to shift inside them. The longer you remain silent and refuse to re-enter the cycle, the more their thoughts begin working against them. What once felt certain suddenly becomes uncertain, and that change can affect them far more deeply than they ever expected. In this video, Narcissa is exploring what truly takes place in a narcissist's mind after an extended period of no contact, and why your silence often becomes far more powerful than any argument, explanation, or emotional confrontation ever could. If this message is helping you understand narcissistic behavior in a deeper and more meaningful way, take a moment to support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and sharing your own experience in the comments. Your story may be exactly what another person needs to hear to recognize patterns they have been struggling to understand for years. Many survivors spend a long time questioning themselves before realizing what they have actually lived through. Hearing someone else's journey can provide clarity, validation, and hope. Your experience has the potential to remind someone that they are not alone, that what they felt was real, and that healing becomes possible once they begin seeing narcissistic behavior for what it truly is, rather than blaming themselves for everything that happened. One of the biggest things long-term no contact takes away from a narcissist is something they quietly depend on every single day: the feeling of emotional control. This control is not always dramatic or easy to recognize. It is not limited to manipulation, arguments, or obvious emotional games. Often it exists in much quieter forms. They may simply feel confident knowing they can contact you whenever they choose and still receive a reply. They may believe your emotions are still tied to them, even after long periods of distance, or assume they continue occupying space in your thoughts regardless of how much time has passed. That belief provides them with a hidden sense of security. Even while ignoring you, disrespecting you, disappearing without explanation, or remaining emotionally unavailable, they still feel comfortable because they assume they can return whenever it benefits them and immediately affect your emotions again. Extended no contact completely interrupts that expectation. Once you stop replying, stop reaching out, stop reacting, and begin emotionally separating yourself from the relationship, the narcissist loses something they relied on without realizing how important it was. They can no longer predict your behavior or understand where they stand in your emotional world. They no longer know whether you still miss them, whether you still think about them, or whether they hold any significance in your life anymore. That uncertainty becomes deeply uncomfortable because narcissistic personalities often depend on maintaining control to protect their self-image. Your silence quietly tells them they may no longer have the emotional influence they once enjoyed. Losing that influence often triggers very different responses. Some become openly angry, others suddenly act loving or apologetic, while some attempt subtle ways to draw your attention back. Beneath all those reactions usually lies the same uncomfortable realization that your life may no longer revolve around them. Silence creates confusion because it removes the emotional information narcissists normally rely on to reassure themselves of their importance. Many narcissistic individuals judge their value by the emotional reactions they can create in other people. It does not necessarily matter whether those reactions are positive or negative. Love, anger, sadness, frustration, disappointment, or desperation all serve the same purpose because they confirm that they still have emotional influence. As long as they can provoke a response, they continue believing they hold power over your inner world. Long-term no contact removes every one of those signals. Suddenly, they have nothing to measure. They do not know whether you are still grieving the relationship, peacefully moving forward, building a happier life, or forming healthy emotional connections with someone else. That lack of information becomes psychologically unsettling because narcissists often struggle with situations they cannot predict, monitor, or control. Even if they appear completely unaffected on the outside, many narcissists begin mentally filling the silence with endless assumptions. The absence of answers leaves space for their imagination to take over, and that uncertainty can slowly grow into insecurity. A narcissist who once felt completely certain of their emotional influence may begin questioning whether they actually mattered to you as much as they believed. Your silence quietly challenges the version of themselves they have spent years protecting. Many narcissists convince themselves that people never truly move on from them and remain emotionally attached indefinitely. Long-term no contact directly confronts that belief with a different reality. That is one reason some eventually return through unexpected messages, sudden concern, emotional performances, or indirect attempts to pull you back into communication. Your silence forces them to face something they rarely expect, that you may have reached a place where they no longer have access to your emotions, and that is often one of the most difficult realities for them to accept. Many narcissists respond to long periods of no contact by pretending they are completely unaffected because protecting the image they present to others is one of their highest priorities. Even if your absence immediately creates emotional discomfort, they rarely allow that vulnerability to be seen. Instead of admitting they feel confused, rejected, or hurt, they often cover those emotions with emotional distance, confidence, or an attitude that suggests they never cared in the first place. This is why some suddenly become much more active on social media, constantly sharing happy moments, displaying a new relationship, celebrating achievements, or acting as though life has never been better. From the outside, it may appear that they moved on effortlessly. In reality, this performance is often less about genuine happiness and more about convincing everyone, including themselves, that your absence has had no emotional effect on them whatsoever. This display of indifference also serves another purpose. Many narcissists understand how powerful emotional reactions can be, so they intentionally create an image that they hope will provoke one from you. If they appear completely unbothered, they may expect you to question your decision, feel jealous, doubt your worth, or become tempted to reach out first. In their mind, your emotional response restores the influence they feel slipping away. That is why their behavior can seem unusually dramatic or carefully staged. Authentic emotional peace is usually quiet, steady, and does not require constant proof. Fake indifference, however, often feels exaggerated because it depends on being noticed. The harder someone works to convince the world they do not care, the greater the possibility that your silence is affecting them much more deeply than they are willing to admit. What appears to be confidence on the outside may actually be an attempt to hide growing insecurity beneath the surface. As the silence continues, many narcissists begin feeling increasingly uncomfortable because they realize they no longer have the same access to your emotions that they once took for granted. They cannot predict your thoughts, influence your decisions, or assume you will always be available whenever they decide to return. For someone who depended on that emotional certainty, losing it can feel deeply unsettling. Rather than accepting that the relationship has truly ended, some begin looking for ways to re-establish contact and pull you back into the familiar emotional cycle. This is often where hoovering begins. Hoovering describes the attempts a narcissist makes to draw someone back after a period of distance, usually by using carefully chosen emotional strategies that encourage communication. These attempts are rarely random. They are often designed to reopen a door they believe should never have been permanently closed. Sometimes these efforts seem surprisingly gentle. They may suddenly offer heartfelt apologies, admit mistakes they previously denied, tell you they miss you, or present themselves as emotionally vulnerable in ways you never experienced before. At other times, they rely on guilt by reminding you of special memories, difficult experiences you survived together, or sacrifices they claim they made for the relationship. They may deliberately reach out during birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, or other emotionally meaningful occasions because they know those moments can lower emotional defenses and make reconnecting feel more tempting. It is also common for a narcissist who once seemed distant, dismissive, or emotionally unavailable to suddenly become affectionate, attentive, and intensely loving. This sudden transformation can easily create the impression that lasting change has finally taken place. However, in many situations, the affection is less about building a healthier relationship and more about restoring access to your emotional world. Once that emotional connection is re-established, the familiar patterns frequently begin returning little by little. The warmth that seems so genuine often fades as soon as the narcissist feels confident they have regained influence again. Their behavior may slowly shift back toward emotional distance, manipulation, inconsistency, or control because the deeper issues were never truly addressed. Although the methods they use may vary, from affection and apologies to guilt or emotional vulnerability, the underlying motivation is often remarkably similar. They want reassurance that they still have the ability to affect your emotions and re-enter your life whenever they choose. Long-term no contact disrupts that belief, which is why they may work so hard to test whether the emotional bond still exists. In many cases, the goal is not genuine healing or mutual growth, but restoring the sense of power they once believed they had over your emotional responses. Many narcissists continue watching from a distance after no contact because, although communication has ended, their desire to remain psychologically connected often has not. Completely losing access to someone can feel uncomfortable for them, especially when they no longer know what is happening in that person's life. Rather than reaching out directly, they may begin observing quietly through social media or people you both know. They may repeatedly visit your profile, watch your stories without interacting, unexpectedly react to old posts, or seem to appear online whenever you are active. Some even create anonymous or secondary accounts so they can follow your life without revealing themselves. Their goal is often to discover whether you are still hurting, thinking about them, or emotionally affected by the past. Those answers help them determine whether they still occupy an important place in your emotional world, even if no words are exchanged between you anymore. Mutual friends, relatives, or shared acquaintances can also become indirect sources of information. A narcissist may casually ask how you are doing, unexpectedly mention your name during conversations, or quietly gather updates about your career, relationships, or personal life while pretending they are only making casual conversation. They often avoid making their curiosity obvious because maintaining the appearance of being unaffected is extremely important to them. From the outside, they want to seem as though they have completely moved on. Behind the scenes, however, they may still be searching for reassurance that they have not been forgotten. Understanding this behavior is important because it is usually driven less by healthy love and more by an unresolved need to maintain emotional awareness and psychological influence. Their interest often reflects discomfort with losing access rather than a sincere desire to rebuild a respectful and emotionally healthy relationship based on mutual care and accountability. For many narcissistic personalities, the greatest struggle is not always the breakup itself, but the realization that your life may continue peacefully without them. Relationships often become intertwined with their need for validation, admiration, identity, and emotional influence. Instead of experiencing the relationship as an equal emotional partnership, they may unconsciously treat it as a source of reassurance that they matter. As long as they can reach you, provoke a response, or receive updates about your emotions, they continue feeling psychologically secure. Even negative attention can satisfy that need because it confirms they still occupy space in your life. When long-term no contact removes every opportunity for that emotional reassurance, their confidence may begin to weaken. They are no longer receiving proof that you still think about them, miss them, or remain emotionally attached. This absence can create what psychologists often describe as an injury to the ego rather than simply the pain of losing intimacy. Because of that, some narcissists become surprisingly determined to reconnect after they realize you are truly moving forward. Ironically, this can happen even if they were emotionally distant, dismissive, or harmful during the relationship itself. Your silence quietly communicates that they no longer have the influence they once assumed would always exist. For someone whose self-worth depends heavily on external validation, that realization can feel deeply unsettling. Beneath the confidence they display to others often exists a much more fragile sense of identity that depends on being reflected through the attention and emotions of other people. When your emotional availability disappears, one of those mirrors disappears with it. In many cases, what hurts most is not simply losing the relationship, but losing the reassurance that they still mattered in your emotional world. Watching you heal and continue your life without them can become far more difficult for their ego than accepting the relationship has truly ended. Some narcissists also respond with anger because your silence prevents them from controlling the emotional direction of the relationship the way they once could. Many become accustomed to influencing the emotional atmosphere through affection, guilt, criticism, confusion, or emotional drama. Whether the reaction they create is positive or negative is often less important than the fact that a reaction exists at all. Every explanation, argument, apology, or emotional response reassures them that they still have influence over your thoughts and feelings. Long-term no contact breaks that pattern completely. Their messages may receive no reply. Attempts to provoke guilt or sympathy stop producing results. Behaviors that once pulled you back into communication suddenly lose their effectiveness. For someone who relied on those emotional responses, this loss of influence can become extremely frustrating because they no longer control how the relationship continues or ends. As that frustration grows, it may eventually appear as resentment or open hostility. Some narcissists begin sending harsh messages, spreading false stories, making passive-aggressive remarks, or trying to damage your reputation simply to provoke some kind of emotional response. Others become sarcastic, dismissive, or deliberately cruel because any reaction feels better than complete silence. In many situations, this anger comes less from genuine heartbreak and more from wounded pride. Your emotional detachment challenges the belief that they can always return and regain influence whenever they choose. What often unsettles them most is not your silence itself, but the calm confidence behind it. Emotional conflict still keeps a connection alive, while genuine distance leaves them with nothing to control. When they realize their usual tactics no longer affect you, they are forced to face a reality they often struggle to accept, that your emotional world may no longer be available for them to manipulate, and that loss of influence can feel profoundly threatening to their sense of self. One of the most meaningful changes that happens during genuine no contact is the transformation that takes place within you. At first, the process can feel overwhelming. You may still wake up thinking about them, replay old conversations, searching for answers, or hoping for the closure you never received. The emotional attachment does not disappear overnight, and healing often happens gradually rather than all at once. But as the weeks and months pass, something begins to shift beneath the surface. The emotional dependence slowly loosens its grip. You stop needing constant explanations, stop waiting for validation, and stop measuring your worth through someone else's attention or approval. In place of that emotional exhaustion, a quieter form of confidence begins to emerge. It is not about proving anything to anyone. Instead, it comes from rediscovering yourself, trusting your own judgment, and realizing that your peace no longer depends on another person's behavior. This new confidence rarely announces itself with dramatic changes or loud declarations. More often, it reveals itself through calmness, emotional balance, healthier boundaries, and a reduced need to react to every provocation. You no longer organize your life around the narcissist's moods, mixed signals, or unpredictable behavior. Instead, you begin investing your energy back into your own goals, relationships, and personal growth. The identity that was once overshadowed by the relationship gradually becomes your own again. Even from a distance, this inner transformation can become noticeable. Narcissists are often highly aware of changes in emotional availability. They recognize when someone no longer chases after them, no longer seeks their approval, and no longer responds with the same emotional intensity. Your quiet independence sends a message without using a single word. It shows that the influence they once believed they had over you is steadily disappearing, and that realization can be deeply uncomfortable for someone who depended on emotional control. This is one reason some narcissists unexpectedly return just as you genuinely begin moving forward with your life. They may suddenly become curious, affectionate, nostalgic, or emotionally expressive after sensing that your attachment to them has weakened. To you, their timing may seem confusing or even ironic. However, it is important to remember where your confidence truly came from. It was never created by making them jealous, proving your value, or convincing them to finally recognize your worth. It grew because you stopped living inside the emotional cycle they created and started reconnecting with the parts of yourself that had been neglected for far too long. Every healthy boundary you established, every moment you chose peace over conflict, and every decision to prioritize your own well-being helped rebuild the confidence that emotional manipulation had gradually taken away. That strength belongs to you, not to the relationship you left behind. Ultimately, the purpose of long-term no contact is not to punish a narcissist or make them experience the same pain they caused you. Its real purpose is to free you from a pattern that kept your emotions connected to someone else's need for control. This is also why silence often creates such powerful reactions. Your silence removes the emotional access they once relied on. It removes the certainty that they could return whenever they wanted. It removes the reactions that reassured them they still held influence over your thoughts and feelings. Some respond by pretending not to care. Others attempt to reconnect through affection, guilt, apologies, or manipulation. Some become resentful, quietly monitor your life from a distance, or grow increasingly frustrated when their usual tactics no longer work. Although these responses may look different on the surface, they often stem from the same uncomfortable realization that they are no longer directing your emotional world. While they are trying to make sense of losing that influence, something far more valuable is happening within you. You are healing in ways that cannot always be seen from the outside. Your confidence is returning, your boundaries are becoming stronger, and your emotional stability is no longer dependent on another person's approval or attention. You begin experiencing a kind of peace that feels unfamiliar at first because it is built on self-respect instead of emotional uncertainty. That is the real power of no contact. It is not about revenge, proving a point, or making someone chase after you. It is about reclaiming your emotional freedom and recognizing that your worth never depended on being chosen, validated, or understood by someone who only valued access to you when it served their own needs. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is simply continuing to move forward, allowing your life to grow without waiting for them to acknowledge what they lost. In the end, your healing does not require their understanding. It only requires your decision to keep choosing yourself, one peaceful step at a time. As we come to the end of this discussion, remember that long no contact is not a strategy for changing a narcissist. It is a decision to change your own life. It is the moment you stop measuring your value through someone else's attention and begin recognizing that your peace, confidence, and emotional well-being were never supposed to depend on another person's approval. A narcissist may react in many different ways when they lose access to you. They may pretend they never cared. They may suddenly become loving, apologetic, angry, curious, or quietly keep watching from a distance. Those reactions can be confusing, especially if you once believed they were incapable of caring at all. But no matter which response they choose, the most important transformation is not happening inside them. It is happening inside you. Every day you remain committed to your healing, you are teaching yourself that emotional freedom is worth protecting. Every boundary you maintain reminds you that love should never require you to abandon yourself. Every moment you choose peace instead of emotional chaos strengthens the version of you that existed long before the manipulation began. Many survivors spend years hoping the narcissist will finally understand the damage they caused. They wait for an apology that never comes, for genuine accountability that never appears, or for the relationship to become something it was never capable of becoming. But healing often begins when you stop waiting for someone else to give you closure. Real closure is not always found in one final conversation or one perfect explanation. Sometimes closure is created by accepting that you already have all the answers you truly need. You know how the relationship made you feel. You know how often your needs were ignored, your emotions were questioned, and your reality was distorted. You do not need another person to validate those experiences before they become real. The moment you stop searching for permission to move on is often the moment your recovery becomes stronger than your pain. It is also important to remember that narcissistic behavior is often driven by patterns that existed long before you entered their life. Their need for control, validation, admiration, and emotional influence was not created by you, and it is not your responsibility to fix it. Many people carry the heavy burden of believing that if they had loved harder, explained themselves better, remained more patient, or sacrificed a little more, the relationship would have finally worked. But healthy relationships are not built on one person constantly proving their worth while the other person controls the emotional balance. Love grows through mutual respect, emotional safety, accountability, and trust. Without those foundations, no amount of effort from one person can create the relationship both people deserve. As your healing continues, you may notice something unexpected. The things that once controlled your emotions slowly lose their power. Their silence no longer feels like rejection. Their attention no longer feels like validation. Their approval no longer determines your confidence. You begin making decisions based on your own values instead of fear. You stop questioning every choice you make. You stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. Little by little, your nervous system learns what emotional safety actually feels like. You discover that peace is not boring. It is freedom. It is waking up without wondering what emotional version of someone else you will face today. It is no longer carrying the exhausting responsibility of managing another person's unpredictable behavior. If a narcissist eventually returns, remember that their return is not automatically proof of change. Sometimes people come back because they miss losing control over someone, not because they have developed the emotional maturity needed for a healthy relationship. Genuine change requires consistent accountability, honest self-reflection, empathy, and long-term behavioral growth. Those qualities cannot be measured by a few emotional messages, sudden affection, or promises made during moments of loneliness. Real transformation always reveals itself through consistent actions over time, not temporary emotional performances designed to reopen old doors. Protect the peace you have worked so hard to build, because rebuilding trust should never come at the cost of losing yourself again. Above all, never forget this. Your value has never depended on whether a narcissist recognized it. Your kindness was always valuable. Your loyalty was always valuable. Your empathy, patience, compassion, and love were never mistakes. The mistake was giving those gifts to someone who could not appreciate them in a healthy way. That does not mean you should stop being a caring person. It simply means you deserve to share those qualities with people who respect them instead of exploiting them. The strongest version of yourself is not the one who wins the narcissist back or finally proves them wrong. The strongest version of yourself is the one who no longer needs to. So continue choosing yourself, even on the days when healing feels slow. Continue protecting your boundaries, even when others do not understand them. Continue building a life that feels peaceful, meaningful, and emotionally safe. The past may always be part of your story, but it no longer has to control your future. Every step you take toward emotional freedom is a step away from manipulation and a step toward becoming the person you were always meant to be. Sometimes the greatest victory is not watching someone else realize what they lost. It is reaching the point where their realization is no longer necessary for your happiness. Your healing is your victory. Your peace is your power. And your future belongs to you.